Hi, it's Mark Evans, and you're listening to Marketing Spark. Today's conversation sits at the intersection of something every SaaS company is trying to figure out: how AI is changing the way that buyers discover, evaluate, and choose solutions. And there's a growing focus on AEO, as evidenced by AI generated answers, citations, and visibility in tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. That's where most of the attention is going. But what if that's only a small part of what's actually happening? My guest today, Tom Rodnai, has been looking at what he calls dark AI. The idea that a large part of influence is happening before brands are ever cited, in the early conversations where buyers are framing the problem and narrowing their options. His team's research suggests that most AI interactions don't include citations at all, which raises a different question. If buyers are making decisions before you're ever mentioned, where should you be focusing? Tom is the CEO of Demand Genius, and today we're going to unpack what's behind this idea, what the data says, and what it means for how SaaS companies think about positioning, content, and growth. Welcome to Marketing Spark.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Why don't we start off with a softball question? When you talk about dark AI, what's the simplest way to understand what's happening beneath the surface?
We like to think of AI as a new form of search or an extension of search 2.0. When you actually look under the hood at how these models behave and what they do, it's not at all. They actually very rarely search for an answer. They compile answers, they converge on answers. And when you understand that, it really changes how you look at the channel. Because if an AI isn't going out for searching for answers consistently, then the way that you influence it gets very different. It also means that it's not able to cite it. We tend to focus on citations, share of voice, things like that. But the AI doesn't want to mention. Search relied on the people that it cited and that it corrected. It needed those links. AI doesn't. It only does so when it is really necessary for the user, i.e. when the user is specifically asking to be directed to someone. Now, when you think about a complex buying journey, very few of those interactions do you want to be directed to a vendor. Generally speaking, you want to get a question answered, want to help frame your problem, define your requirements, all of those things. We know in B2B, that's the majority of the challenge. That's nothing. So that's what we mean by dark AI. It's all of those little interactions from day one of being problem through to actually looking for solutions, where AI isn't searching for answers, it's not mentioning you, but AI is influencing the buyer's requirement, is influencing the way that the problem is framed, and we know that all of that adds up ultimately to the decision to make, much more than just who's visible at the point of conversion.
I think what you've highlighted, the fact that we're barely scratching the surface when it comes to AI and appreciation of how it works and how we should use it. On a related note, when you think about how many companies, whether they're B2B or SaaS, are approaching AI and the level of sophistication they have when it comes to understanding how the models work and how their marketing and sales can leverage the power of AI and these models, where do you think they're at? If you were a CEO and you saw this AI tsunami in front of you, would you be confident right now that your team knows what they need to do? Or do you think there's a giant learning curve that a lot of CEOs need to put their companies on?
Definitely that. Just talking to marketers, I'm always struck by it. I think they really feel like they're in a vice, and I'm getting away from AEO and more just AI in general. AI is a very interesting trend because it's defined very quickly by marketing dollars, a lot more than actual case studies, use cases, and validated examples of it working really well in practice. It's also, I think, very difficult for a marketer because the earliest adopters and power users initially of AI are investors and CEOs and founders and all of the people who impose expectations on you. So you're caught between platforms that overpromise, underdeliver, overpromise to your boss, and then you're left holding the can or holding the bag when it underdelivers. You don't have any the demands are no less of you. If anything, they're higher in terms of quality and quantity. Right. But these tools often don't quite deliver. And you're the one who, with ever decreasing resources, because content is now a commodity, code is a commodity, has to deliver on those things. So it's a difficult time.
What does that conversation look like between the CEO and the head of marketing and the head of sales? The CEO obviously has these high expectations. They recognize that AI could be a game changer for their business. Marketers are mandated to embrace AI in some way, shape, or form because it's the way that they can become more efficient and maybe in the process reduce headcount or at least hold headcount. So what does that conversation look like? What is the CEO? What should the CEO say to the marketer? What should the marketer say back to the CEO?
It's different in every organization. It depends a lot on the size of the organization and on the CEO and the marketer. What a lot of marketers feel it's manifesting at the moment as a crunch on headcount. It's do more with less, or really like it's being used as an efficiency tool to try and cut out humans. Which I think we will continue to go on that flow for a little bit until eventually people realize that actually the best results from AI come when you mix human insight in really intelligently and you use it as a tool not to automate what humans could already do, but to actually unlock complete new possibilities. I'll give you an example. With our content that we did actually about the Dark AI report that we're talking about today.
Right.
That's something that a startup of our size could not have attempted 5 years ago. We used AI to capture an immense amount of data that was qualitative in nature, right? So that's what AI does really well. It does qualitative analysis, subjective analysis, makes judgment calls at scale. So you simply couldn't have conducted that analysis 5 years ago. And that's what led us to do it. We were like, actually, how can we use AI to do something on a scale that we couldn't have done before? Really big, that rather than just to churn out lots of low quality pieces of content. And that's, I think, the journey that everyone is then going to go on is once we compress headcount and we realize that we did get lower results as we dropped, those things did fall off together. We then start building headcount back up, but we build it up in a much smarter way, much more native, allows us to capture the benefits.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think we're in a period of learning. We're in a period of transition. I think a lot of people are just trying to figure out how they should move forward. And that is an immense challenge right now. Thank you for referencing the AI report that your company published earlier this year. In the report on dark AI and AEO influence, what specifically did you see in the data that convinced you that influence is already set before citations appear, rather than citations being one of the several factors shaping the final decisions? And I guess to load up the question even further, what were your surprising findings from the report?
Everything surprised us because we honestly didn't go into it with too much of a kind of set belief. I had an inkling or a hypothesis that all of the advice out there that AEO is just SEO. I'm like, that's incredible. They're two very different pieces of technology. It's so good to give us the exact same best practices for how to optimize for them both. But I had a little hunch that something seemed a little bit off there. But then when we got into it, I think I was very surprised at how stark the trend was in terms of citations. So what we saw, and for context for anyone listening, what we did, we ran an immense number of prompts and we wanted to look specifically at how AI responses vary across complex B2B buyer journeys. So we picked 14 complex categories, different levels of complexity, all B2B. And we ran prompts very deliberately across awareness, consideration, and conversion phases. And then we analyzed the response to our technology and our AI to understand how they varied. And what we saw was, you look at citation, or actually let's start that. You get mentioned at every stage of the funnel, but inevitably the more bottom of funnel you get, the more you get through to conversion. The rate increases pretty dramatically. You look at how often retrieval is invoked. This is what really surprised me, actually. And when we talk about it not really being a search channel at all, in awareness, 0% of the time retrieval was invoked. In consideration, 0% of the time retrieval was invoked. In conversion, then it was 48%. For the vast majority, we know that the bulk sits in awareness and consideration, and it doesn't go looking for answers. So your content, it's not useless because over time you can influence trading data, but it's a pretty long horizon. And it's not a very well understood thing. And accordingly with that, citation rate was very simple as well, 48%. So all of our measurement, all of our strategy at the moment is about the idea that I produce a piece of content and tomorrow it shows up in AI directly cited. Simply not how these models work. Only a half of those bottom of funnel queries is that a trend that is plausible. And there's a whole load of stuff we can go into for why it still isn't quite that direct. And
if a marketer came to you or a CEO came to you and said, Tom, what are the 3 takeaways from your report? What should I do? How should I act upon what you've discovered? from this in-depth piece of research, what would you tell them?
So I'm going to break it into kind of measurement and then strategy. So I think for measurement, we have to develop new metrics that are fit for the new problem rather than trying to apply old ones, right? CEO style metrics. The best one that we've been able to come up with, and this is new, right? So I don't have all of the answers. I'm always very keen to say that. It is looking at fit. So there's an immense different number of ways that I can ask a single prompt to AI. Right. So if you just try one of those and measure the response and say that I get cited with so many different variations, what is very predictive of how you are represented across all of those different interactions, every stage of the journey, it's just actually what does AI think of you? So how does it view your strengths, your weaknesses, your fit for different buying criteria, different use cases? You can map that to different personas that you want to influence and get a really good sense of, okay, not for this query did it cite us, but for a CFO at a big company who we know wants X, Y, and Z, does it think we're good at that or not? And if the answer is not, what does it say we're bad at? And how can over time we slowly correct? Right? And that produces, like, if you can make sure that whenever the CFO at your big deal that you're trying to close goes on and asks, are you good value for money? You don't want to make sure it says yes. And that's more valuable than any amount of visibility at the top of the funnel. So that's what, from a measurement point of view, focus on fit more than visibility. And are you demonstrating that the right use cases?
Right. And how do you define fit? What's the layman's version of fit?
So you can quantify that. Right? We run sentiment analysis on how your brand is represented for different criteria. So let's take, if I'm buying, we'll go with a commonplace example. Right? I'm buying trade, which is a relatively high consideration purchase. There's different buying criteria that people might apply. They want comfort. They want springiness. They want them to be environmentally friendly. They want them to have a really cool swoosh on the side. Whatever the criteria people might buy, we can ask the AI, how good do you think Nike, Adidas, all of these are for that? Run sentiment analysis on that. Then that gives you your really clear breakdown of what it thinks you're good at and bad. And then you go through a process of mapping that to what your different segments or your different stakeholders might want. I won't get into the maths that underlies it. That is something that you can quantify.
Right.
And track as a percentage and a KPI.
So that's number one. Number two piece of advice would be what from the reports?
Stop viewing content as a one-to-one route into a particular query. Take a step back, right? Search at its very most basic level. The job that you did with search, you find a really high intent query or a really common or high intent query, high volume or high intent. You write a piece of content for it that was summarizing knowledge against that query and the best summary one. That's search in a very simple nutshell. AI doesn't work like that. You would need to find, there's like an endless number of those queries. What it looks at more is the entire corpus of your content. Because it doesn't, when I put in what CRM should I buy, it doesn't go searching for an answer to that. That one piece of content, which you keyword stuffed with what CRM should people buy, isn't doing you any good. What is doing you good is the perception that you build up over all of your content as to who you are, who you're for, what you're good at, what you're bad. So that's actually quite a big shift because it changes the approach to content creation because a lot more of your effort then has to go away from pumping out new content and towards maintaining, improving content that you already have. You want all of your content to be high quality, consistent, clear, and current, right? If it's all of those things, it's consistently painting the same picture of your brand to AI and to humans.
As a content marketer, I'm not sure whether I should be terrified of that point of view or excited. The pressure not to create content means I don't know what my job is going forward. On the other hand, the focus on high quality content and making sure that the content I already publish is optimized is actually not a bad thing because if I'm proud of what I've done, obviously I'm incentivized to make it better. If you're a marketer and you're going to say to your CEO, this is our approach to content marketing, you have to not look at it as single bullets that we're firing to see if we can hit the target. It's going to be almost like a slow burn. The totality of our content and the quality of our content, that will make the difference in terms of AI. So we need to take a more pragmatic, more measured, more quality focused view of the world. Is that the way that I should interpret it?
Yes, I think so. I would say as well, like bearing in mind, like whatever I know XYZ is dead is the very common refrain on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Like search
Yeah.
is not dead. There is still
Yeah.
SEO. So like I'm talking about your AEO
Yeah.
strategy,
Yeah.
not your SEO, and there is space for both of them. So you can blend that in a way that achieves the results you need in the timeline you have and stuff like that. But strictly from an AEO perspective, yeah, it's quality over quantity. Every piece of, we have this kind of framework called content debt. Every piece of content you put out, you take on a small amount of content debt because the amount of monthly, quarterly work that you have to do just to maintain your overall library just
Mhm.
increases ever so slightly. So when you understand that, you can be very deliberate about how you do it. We're an early stage company. We're going to start putting out content at actually relatively high volumes. We're pretty good with how we do that. And we have this kind of quality threshold so that we're really careful, but we need to build authority in our chosen areas. And so we actually need some volume. And so you potentially, it's like building technology. You accept at times will take on a bit of that.
Yeah.
You just have to have an understanding of, know that it has to be.
One of the other sort of analogies that you talk about is the idea of an iceberg, and curious about the mechanism underneath the metaphor. Like, how does a brand become viable before it's ever mentioned?
For listeners, the metaphor also for me, like it's an epiphany that I don't know if is actually as visual for other people as it was. But basically, the search with the funnel again, because all of the volume sits at the top and then you try and push people down.
Mm-hmm.
AI is the exact inverse, right? All of you get your traffic from the bottom of funnel posts, not the top of funnel posts, which means that you actually get a lot less traffic. So the way that we think about the iceberg is what above the surface is that 16% of AI responses where there is a citation. So they're the ones that under current metrics you can track. So if you say AI is not that important to us, we're only seeing this many citations and then we get 100 hits a day. Well, you are seeing the tip of the iceberg because 16% of prompts produce a citation. And then what percentage of those actually click through to your site? So if you're seeing 100 hits, you can multiply that massively to see the actual overall impact that AI is having. It's a very common, for anyone who's watched the Titanic, the vast majority of the mass of any iceberg sits beneath the surface. And that's just a visual that I find really helpful for understanding AI. Anything that's showing up in your current metrics is the tip of the iceberg.
So if you're being successful in terms of tip of the iceberg activity, that means that you're probably doing really well with activity below the surface as well. You just can't see it.
I think it does and it doesn't. What I can't tell you definitively yet the correlation between success at the tip and success beneath the surface. I think the tip is, are you visible when someone searches for your solution? Everything below is, are you influencing problem framing and requirement building in a way which gets more people to search for your solution? It's like performance marketing versus brand marketing or positioning. And that's what it all comes back to.
What I find interesting about that analogy, if in fact it's accurate, is that top of the funnel content, especially in B2B and SaaS, is sexy. It's fun. It's lists. It's 10 things you should know. It's why we're the best. It's the kind of stuff that is low hanging fruit, easy to engage. It's the kind of stuff as marketers, we think that consumers like to read because I'm using the wrong word, but it's light. Bottom of the funnel content is dense and heavy and big on product education and showing people how platforms work. And as a marketer, I can tell you it's tough slogging. What's important, but it's like going to the gym and lifting weights. You have to do it, but it really isn't that exciting as opposed to being on the elliptical where you're racing really fast. So it's kind of
specifically, it's leg day.
yeah, it's a leg day. That's what it is. That's what you're describing. Shifting gears a little bit, when you look at AEO and how companies should approach it, when you see how companies are trying to frame themselves as the only option, a lot of them lead to brand positioning and the idea if you have clear and compelling brand positioning, that's how you're going to attract and influence buyers. But in the AEO world, influence is a different creature. Can you provide some insight into that traditional mindset of positioning versus the way that buyers behave and what they react to in this AEO world?
Could you expand on the question a little bit?
In the traditional world, if like we all lean into brand positioning as what do you do? Who do you serve? How are you different? and what's in it for the buyer. And if
Yep.
we feel if we get that message out into the marketplace, then that's going to be enough to make them say, I should check out brand XYZ. But in the AEO world, I don't know if that stuff matters as much as opposed to creating enough content, enough high quality content. Does it complement good brand positioning, or is it more important than good brand positioning? Like, how do you get that brand story out in an AEO world?
So there's a few things that we've seen work really well. I think the first is specificity is actually really important. And you mentioned it, like the all-in-one platform. That's not a very good claim to make anymore. The way let's use the CRM category because one a lot of people know. If I'm a CRM startup right now, I'm not going to be the best CRM for everyone for everything.
Right.
Salesforce and HubSpot are probably going to have that pretty locked down. What I can do, I can go a lot more specific. And going back to those use cases, I can say, okay, I'm the best CRM for small, medium businesses in London who are really interested in MCP or AI first integrations or something cool like describe Apptio. There's specificity is a really easy way to embed your positioning. And when the criteria that AI over the course of a long set of interactions with the user, what it does during that time is it gathers context and applies criteria. And if you can find your positioning, which is a big enough, meaty part of it, then it's going to eventually come to you at that point. There's an analogy or an image that I quite like here, which is think of like a spotlight on a street. You can run around at the bottom trying to like it's very difficult to cover everything. You're trying to get into the spotlight. You have a couple of things that you can do. You can run around chasing. That's what I think most people are doing at the moment. Or you can actually go further up towards it. And then suddenly it's an awful lot easier because the spotlight is a greater percentage. Right? So that's what you're trying to do is go up towards it and try and influence the way that AI frames your category for specific groups of people in a way that will ultimately make visibility inevitable rather than you having to chase it. So how do you do that? What the biggest thing that we've seen work is original research. But I don't know if you saw Google did a big core update recently, and one of the biggest kind of trends that came out of it, people have analyzed that is 22% visibility boost in the AI overviews for content that was based on original research versus content that wasn't. So we have this concept called information gain, which I think should be a KPI for every content team out there at the moment, which is basically, again, if we go back to that old role of content, query, summary of knowledge against that query, best one wins. That is useless now. If all you're doing is summarizing knowledge and probably getting AI to do it, well, I could get AI to do that for me on a bespoke basis. I don't need your content and AI doesn't need your content. It's useless to humans and it's useful to machines. What is useful and what does get consistently picked up and reinforces positioning is having some sense of your content IP or some kind of original research. That's what we call information, something that produces net new knowledge that is worth citing, that is worth incorporating into how AI understands your category. That seems to really consistently boost the authority of your site and lead to influence. We have a framework for measuring, which is you have different tiers. So there's level 0, which is no information gain. Level 1 is interpretive gain. So a new slant on an existing piece of knowledge, right? And you can achieve that with AI if you're really good at how you use and feed your positioning, your market perspective in and have it produce level 1. Level 2 is empirical information gain. So new data, new research, survey, whatever it is. AI won't produce that. And then level 3 is conceptual information. So backed by original research, something genuinely new and innovative. What I would like the dark AI is for us is a new concept.
Right.
Picked up. Again, to go back to your question about a while back, what the CEO should do. One of the biggest things I would is investing in that original research function because it feeds everything.
Basically, you're eating your own dog food by creating this original research and focusing on the dark AI. What's happened since you published the report? Have you been able to see, like within AEO or within SEO or within inbounds, is that kind of thing? Is it working for you? It's an interesting case study. You're telling other people to do, but is it working?
Yes and no, because it's not instantaneous. I think certainly, yes, it's produced inbound and produce results. And it allows me to go and have conversations like this. That has a powerful effect. You get press coverage, things like that. It's helped to establish our new positioning. We pivoted into this problem a little bit, and it's helped to establish that within the models. If you go and ask it about us, we're not quite at a point yet where it's going to mention us over some of the competitors. It's a good case study. That's one of our biggest priorities for the next couple of months, is to solve that. A deeply hypocritical gap for us, what you have when you're early.
As I said off the top, I get a lot of inbounds for being guests on the podcast, just like probably every other podcaster these days. In the days of automation, I would say that 95% of them I reject because they're irrelevant or off topic. But when I saw the pitch about dark AI and AEO, it was like, well, I could rally around that.
Well, it's backed by research.
Yeah.
What everyone wants. I think particularly in this space, there is so much. It's a space being defined by content marketing rather than research. And we tried to do that for a little bit. And then I was like, hold on, why don't we actually just use facts to cut through the noise? That should be a pretty good idea.
People remember storytelling, but they don't remember facts. That's part of a storytelling presentation that we all marketers like to give. I guess facts do matter. If you're the CEO of a fast moving company, your marketers are probably using AI. I suspect they've got Claude or ChatGPT Pro subscriptions. They say they're using it to do frameworks and to do research. So they're probably using it to create content. Maybe it's not the highest value content, but in some way, shape, or form, they're using it to create content. But if you want to be on the cutting edge, if you really want to start to leverage AI and harness the power of AEO, where would you start? From the top down, what kind of direction would you start to give to your teams, whether it's sales or marketing or customer service, in terms of, we got to figure out, we got to do this right. And we got to focus on the fundamentals, and we got to have the right plan at the right time. What's your advice in terms of how a CEO would get started?
I think my first thing would be that you have to give people space to play, and you have to give them permission to do that. And that requires a little bit less obsession with efficiency. I think it's something we've done. It's a sad fact of technology and AI. It's all created this hyper focus on how efficient someone is, and it creates no space to play with it. So I don't think it's a coincidence when I said earlier, the early adopters are CEOs and investors. It's people who are in control of their own time and can say, you know what, I'm going to spend today playing with Claude and I'm going to see what I can do. If you're in a team, you've got strict KPIs and someone breathing down your neck for what I can do. Right? If I had someone doing that every day, the number of days where I'd have to say, I was playing with this, it didn't work. And that's not acceptable. So you have to create like the freedom and the culture that people can do that and look and judge the outputs of it over a longer time horizon. That, like, what did you do today? Because that's what's going to produce. The other thing I would say, challenge people to produce quality with it. We could go in for ages into how you do that, but I would challenge people in the team not to replace something, not to have it do something end to end. Look at a process. Think, if I had 10 times as much time to do this thing, what would I do? And how can I use AI to then go and achieve that? Because AI does have all the time in the world, all the patience in the world. And when you're really clever with how you blend it into a process that works, you can unlock so much. You can improve the output so much rather than just multiply the output.
I love the idea of quality over quantity, because in the AI world, quantity is easy. It's easy to scale your content, a couple of props, and you've got 10 blog posts for the rest of the month. What do you want to do? But how, like, CEOs are busy, they've got other priorities, and they're not always watching what marketing is doing. How do you make sure that there's alignment in terms strategically, as far as everybody knows where you need to go strategically, how you need to leverage this new wave of technology, but how does a CEO ensure that best practices are being followed, that their efforts are being successful? Because at the end of the day, it's all about ROI. How are we going to spend our resources, and what kind of return are we going to get? But what kind of tools or insight does the senior executive team need to have to make sure we're doing the right things?
It's difficult because I think it's really hard to put like a carte blanche rule because it's going to be different for every team. Somebody's going to have that. I take us and on this particular topic, that's all I can really speak to other than people that I immediately know and obviously talk to about this. But for us, we're a relatively small team. I use AI to create alignment a lot. So I've built a system where basically via MCP, all of this conversation, which I'm recording, but I'll have my notes from Granola. I have my notes from our one-to-one, all feeds into a central document, which manages our go-to-market alignment, and the team in Claude can go. And because it has my one-to-ones with everyone in the team, they can say, what's John up to? What's Steve up to? Whoever the people are of the team, and they can ask. So it keeps everyone aligned on a kind of project basis through that. And that helps because when you're asking lots of people to play, there becomes a really high risk that you just have 5 people playing with the same thing and trying to solve the same problem. So trying to consolidate all of that into a way that they can get quick feedback on whether an idea is worth pursuing before the next one-to-one, I think is really important to the best of your ability.
Right.
I think within a leadership team, again, I think it's going to vary, but depending on where they are, but I think it would just be setting the expectation that you're using AI to solve problems and giving the kind of freedom to then fail to solve that problem, I think is where people get tricked up.
I love the idea of experimentation. I spent a lot of my days experimenting with Claude, especially co-work as a game-changing tool in terms of how I'm using AI. I think that you're right that a lot of marketers are under pressure to perform. And that means that often they're afraid of making mistakes or doing something that doesn't follow best practices or a campaign that isn't as successful as it should be. And maybe Google was on the right track when they said that 20% of their time should be spent experimenting. I think marketers need that. And salespeople for that matter need that too, is that there's tons of tools out there. There's tons of things you can do. And sometimes they're not going to work and that's okay. But great conversation, Tom. Thanks for this. The idea of dark AI is super interesting. The report, which I'll share in the show notes, is a must read. There's a ton of really great research in there, and it's good to see that you're walking the walk and talking the talk when it comes to that kind of thing. Where can people learn more about you and Demand Genius?
Don't know our website, demand-genius.com. Those there, we publish all of our research there and we publish it all really openly. So go to the bottom, we outline the full methodology. By all means, go reproduce it. But if you find something different, tell me, we'll publish that too. We're very committed to doing this with the market and figuring out this new thing that we all have to learn how to do together. So you're probably one of the few things that I promise you is that I will have a different story a year from now if we do this again. So yeah, I'd encourage you to do that and also connect with me on LinkedIn, Tom Rodnai. Rodnai is very difficult to spell, Rudnai. And always have to connect.
I should ask, if I'm a B2B or SaaS, why should I call you? What can you do for me? What's your raison d'etre?
Oh God, is this the elevator pitch?
This is the elevator pitch. There's no pressure now.
You've got to give me some warning. I'll help you build an AEO strategy that focuses on influence over visibility. So see what AI thinks of you, understand how you can better align content positioning, reputation to influence that over time, and then track the revenue impact of that as well. And it will pieces of content and elements that are influencing.
Thanks, Tom, for the great and insightful conversation. And thanks to everybody for listening to another episode of Marketing Spark. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Drop a quick rating and share it on social media. You can reach me by email, mark@markevans.ca. Connect with me on LinkedIn or visit marketingspark.co. I'll talk to you next time.